All right, so I am absolutely addicted to these low carb, low sugar Oreos called Eat Sundays. It's this awesome new company that just makes the most delicious low carb, low sugar Oreos. So I wanted to give them a quick shout out and make something really kind of tasty with it. So I decided I was going to make a peanut butter Oreo pie. So with that in mind, I got ingredients that were exclusively low carb, low sugar. So I got the Oreos, obviously, from Eat Sundays, and there'll be a link in the description to them because they really are awesome and you really should check them out. But I got some cream cheese and some erythritol based sweetener, powdered sugar called Swerve. So that doesn't have any calories in it. And apart from that, I got this keto Cool Whip that is basically zero sugar, zero carbs, and it tastes just like Cool Whip. I believe that one is sweetened with monk fruit sweetener, which is the same sweetener that they use in these Eat Sundays Oreos. So what I did, as you can see, is I got a little, food processor, and I ground up between 25 to 30 of these Oreos to a fairly fine powder, cream and Oreo all together. And I put it into this pie dish. Now, the only cooking involved with this recipe was this crust. I'll be baking that in the oven. But first, I'm going to get some melted butter and add that so that it can kind of form an actual crust. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I didn't spray down with grease or anything this pie dish container, and that did ultimately make this a lot harder to get out of the pie dish in a clean, nice looking slice. It wasn't the end of the world, but it could have been better. Now, you could just use a Ziploc bag and a hammer, or like a tenderizing hammer that you might use to tenderize meat. But to get it to a really nice fine powder, I really wanted to go with the food processor, and it didn't seem like you could really over process it. You just could really just keep going until it looked like a powder. And I was worried that the cream in the middle of the Oreos would, somehow like make it gunk up together and not really make a nice powder. But recipes I found online for regular Oreo crusts for pies never seem to indicate that you should take the cream out. So I went by that, and that did seem to work. So the butter was softened already, but I did melt it in the microwave, as you can see here. And I just wanted to not take it too long so that the butter didn't separate out. And you'll see that there's still some Oreo in the food processor, and I wanted to save that to top the pie at the end. So put some of that aside, and then I got the butter and just kind of mixed it all in there, and just get in there with your hands and mix it all up. And I did spend quite a lot of time, messily trying to get it all evenly spread out on the pie dish. And I didn't do that great a job. And I tried with my hands, and I'm going to get a glass here in a second and kind of try to use that. But this was really messy, really imprecise, unprofessional. I'm sure this could have been done a lot better, but I did get the job done. And that's ultimately what matters. So yeah, I tried rolling the glass. I tried bunching it up against the side, and it really wasn't great. I don't recommend doing it this way. I'm not really sure how I would do it differently. I know some recipes mentioned using a fork. I'm not really sure how you would use a fork for this. Maybe a spoon would be better, but just kind of worked my way and kept working on it, and really tried to like pat it down hard so that it would make a crust. I didn't want like all of it to just completely crumble when I took the pie piece out, and a little bit did, but this did work. I'm not sure if it would have been better, thinner, thicker. I definitely don't think I would go thicker. So for a pie dish like this, I definitely wouldn't use more than 30 Oreos. with saving some aside like I did. In fact, if I did it again, I probably would use maybe 5 less Oreos overall for the whole process. Now, the way you get this to set is you need to kind of cook it in the oven for about 6 minutes. So I had a preheated oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Look up the conversion if you live outside of the States. And just kind of popped it in there and let it sit. I'm not really sure. Yeah, see, the glass really was kind of like a very poor way of doing this, but like I said, it did get the job done in the end. Just had to work on it for a while. And you'll hear my cat meowing in the background, as he does. All right, so into the oven you go. I believe it was 350, and I did it for about 6 minutes. Yeah, 350. So let's just pop that into the oven, close the cabinet door, and just leave it there for 6 minutes before coming back to it. Now, you can't really see it in there, even with the oven light on, but it is what it is. So after that 6 minutes was up, pulled that out, and you have to let this slowly, completely cool, or it's just not going to work as well. For multiple reasons. The filling will get melty on the hot Oreo crust if you do it too soon. The crust won't form as well in general later on, so you really let it cool. So I left that out on the counter for at least an hour or two. It might have been more. Now, what you can do while it's cooling is work on the filling, which I actually didn't do. I came back after it was already fully cooled. So what we're going to use for the filling is peanut butter. I went with Smucker's Natural Creamy because it was the lowest sugar / carb option I could find for peanut butter. And the Philadelphia cream cheese was just regular plain cream cheese. And you'll see that True Whip is the keto kind of Cool Whip that doesn't have any of those nasty carbs in it. I actually had to go to 2 different Publixes because the first one I went to was sold out of this True Whip stuff, so I guess it's pretty popular. As for the peanut butter, it was about a cup, ultimately, that went in. Now, and the other ingredient that you can see in the back there is that Swerve, which I mentioned earlier, which is a really good sugar alternative. And that's a pre-powderized confectioner's version of it. So that was what I needed, and that is what I used. Now, I ended up putting a little bit too much peanut butter in the measuring cup, so I took a little bit out and put it back in the jar just because I didn't want to overdo it. Probably would have been fine either way. A little extra peanut butter never hurt anyone. So ultimately, I went with a stand mixer for this because way lower effort. I mean, in theory, you might be able to do it by hand. You definitely could just use a hand mixer, be a cheaper option, but I do love my stand mixer, even though I don't use it very often. I think it's a really good investment. And I just love watching it kind of beat. So I'm going to get all that peanut butter in there and start by mixing that with the cream cheese. Get that nice and kind of beaten together. I used I think it's called a paddle attachment for the stand mixer. And you'll see that here in a second. So, yep, plain old Philadelphia cream cheese. Whoever was steered wrong by peanut butter and cream cheese. Now, I noticed when I did this that it really just seemed like it was kind of way too dry of a mixture, the peanut butter and the cream cheese. But ultimately, once everything was mixed in, it really was just perfect. So into the stand mixer that mixture goes. And I'd say about medium speed was sufficient. So I just locked it up, gave it its medium speed. Now this video is a little bit sped up, so it'll kind of look like it's going faster than medium speed. But I promise you, it's about halfway, right dead in the middle, maybe a little slower. Now, once that was pretty much mixed together, I decided to measure out the sugar. Now, the amount of sugar I kind of based on a recipe for a pie that was using normal sugar. So aimed for about 1.25 cups, 1.25 cups. But this was kind of rough eyeballing. I wasn't super, super precise. And I definitely didn't use any weight measurements because I'm not sure how the density of this stuff compares to the density of regular sugar. So it just would have been kind of a shit show. Anyway, measure that out and just kind of slowly add that to maybe not that slowly, but slowly add it to the stand mixer. Excuse my voice. I'm sure it's getting really bad. It's been a long day. I'm pretty tired. But that is what it is. I decided a little bit more. A little extra sweetness never hurt anyone. Unless they're diabetic. But again, this isn't real sugar, so even they could enjoy this. Now, you could be super careful and turn off the stand mixer, add a little bit, turn it back on, rinse and repeat, but I'm a daring individual and I'm just going to dump it all in there pretty haphazardly. A little bit messier this way, and you get, the dust clouds of sugar coming out of it, so don't breathe that in. It'll taste good, but your lungs probably won't like it. And you just kind of let that keep going. And like I said before, it seemed like, especially at this point, like way too dry and crumbly of a mixture. Maybe crumbly is going a bit far, but it just seemed like a very dry mixture. Now, this True Whip stuff, which I let thaw fairly slowly in the fridge over a course of a few hours, it didn't seem like it was going to be wet enough. I was contemplating putting some heavy whipping cream in, but I'm glad I didn't because it really did come out the perfect consistency. So it looks just like regular Cool Whip, and it pretty much tastes like regular Cool Whip, which is kind of amazing. I believe this has the same sweetener in it that the Swerve is, so erythritol, which is, I'm not sure what the monk fruit sweetener is called. It's like chemical name, but basically those are the only two sweeteners in this recipe between the Oreos. Oh no, this uses the monk fruit sweetener. The erythritol is just the powdered sugar. So that's the main sweetener in this recipe. But the powdered sugar, it gets it to the right consistency, adds some more sweetness, and I think the blend of different sweeteners really kind of made it work better. So there wasn't any kind of like overpowering off tastes. Now I will say, having tasted this, that the whole thing tasted fantastic. It did not taste like a low sugar, low carb dessert or anything remotely resembling that. Now, I still wouldn't call this necessarily healthy or not fattening because peanut butter by itself is pretty fattening, but it's delicious, and this definitely fits within a keto diet. So if you were having like a exorbitant luxurious dessert while on your keto low carb diet, this would be a solid choice. And it's very dangerously easy to eat, but it's also very rich, so it kind of fills you up and makes it a little bit harder to go completely bananas while eating it. Me personally, I can overcome that and still overeat it, but I think it's a really good option. Now, just to be careful, I kind of wanted to use this spatula to scrape down the sides. I was trying to do it while the machine was still running. That didn't really work. So kind of give it a stop, and you'll see that what the mixture looks like. It looks pretty great. It really does look like a peanut butter Oreo pie filling, probably because it is. Anyway, gave it just one good scrape down before letting it fully mix together again. And I mean, ultimately, this is pretty much it. So this is going to get finished mixing up, and then we're going to put it into the pie crust and add the Oreo crumb topping and pop it in the fridge for a few hours to set. And that's ultimately all there is to it. It was a fairly easy recipe. So I do highly recommend giving this a try if sweets are your thing and you want to go low carb. And just in general, these Oreos are just phenomenal. Like, absolutely phenomenal. Um, I may have mentioned before, this isn't a sponsored video in any way. This is just, these are, my food addiction. I absolutely love these things. I've bought, oh God, like 3, 4, maybe 5 orders of 6 boxes a piece. And I had to put these Oreos for this recipe aside so I didn't accidentally eat them before it was time to do this video, because I've been planning on doing this for a while. It's been a kind of idea in my head ever since I had one of these Sundays cookies with peanut butter, and I was like, oh my God, I wish there was a peanut butter version, because peanut butter Oreos, absolute favorite Oreos in the world. So if I could have a peanut butter Oreo without having to um, eat Oreos that are gonna really make me fat, this is kind of like a lower guilt version. So I'm trying to get them to make peanut butter Oreos, and maybe that'll be in the cards one day. But for now, I figured I'd settle with just adding peanut butter myself and making this awesome peanut butter based pie. So it's very thick, very, not clumpy, but it wasn't the consistency I was expecting. I was expecting it to be a little less thick, a little less viscous, and then I thought it would set better in the fridge, but it really was fairly solid, as you can see from the very beginning, and setting in the fridge just kind of made that even better. This part wasn't particularly hard, just kind of smooth it out best you can. You could probably make some sort of swervy design in the top or something, but I was planning on dumping the powdered Oreos all over it anyway, so I just wanted to kind of get it even level. Now, I don't think there's any reason to be this meticulous getting the filling off of the paddle, because that's good eating right there. That is you lick that thing clean, you'll be a happy camper. Which I did. But fortunately, I got most of it off, so I wasn't being too bad before my dinner. And of course, the spatula you use to spread this out, that's another great little snack. You wouldn't want that delicious filling to go to waste. That would just be an absolute sin. All right, all nice and spread out. Oof, so good. Just thinking about the piece I had shortly before recording this audio, and oof, it is as good as it looks, taste-wise. I mean, assuming you think it looks good. I do. Um, Maybe not professional, maybe not like it came out of a box or a bakery, but definitely on point. Now, I was trying to think of a good way of doing this, but I was thinking of grabbing maybe like some sort of strainer or something and kind of sifting it, but it's just not powdered enough to do that. It would just get caught in the strainer. So I just kind of did my best to just kind of shake it on there, and I figured that was good enough. I was kind of thinking I could maybe shift it around by shaking the pan at the end, the dish. None of that really made a difference or worked all that well. So, I mean, I just kind of eyeballed it, just kind of shot in the dark. And I think ultimately it looked fine that way. See, the shaking really didn't matter. I kind of spread it out a little bit with my hands, but again, I don't think it made much of a difference. It looks a little bit sloppy, but tastes amazing, and totally happy with that. So at this point, saran wrap on top and into the fridge it has to go. So, how long in the fridge? Well, probably the longer the better, but I'd say at least 2-3 hours would be a good place to start with that. Also, got an extra container of keto Cool Whip because I didn't see any reason not to add more Cool Whip on top, or as Stewie says, Cool Whip. Um, so, I said at least 2-3 hours. I think this was in the fridge for about 4 hours, maybe a little bit longer. Overnight's probably your best bet, but this stuff was already pretty thick and really didn't need to set too much. So that few hours was all it really needed. But if you're doing this in advance, it'd probably work even better. The only real bad news is that this did not want to come out. It really didn't. If you saw the thumbnail, you'll know that I kind of got it out neatly, but it was not super pretty and it was not easy. And I kind of bashed away at it with like, oh, maybe I can use a tiny spatula thing, or maybe I should use a fork, maybe I should use a spoon. The spatula thing was a mistake. It was just too thick. And like I said in the beginning, this wasn't really like greased at all, so this did not want to come out of the dish at all. The crust wanted to stick to the glass dish. But with a little force and a little bit of luck, I was able to kind of get it out. It felt like it was hopeless and that this was just going to be a super big mess. The second piece, which isn't in the recording, is the piece that I used for the thumbnail. And that one was a little bit prettier than this first one. But I think they were both, relatively acceptable. As far as presentation goes, this wasn't, a professional piece. It looks like it was made at home, but I still think it came out fairly pretty, so I'm pretty happy with it. There was lots of that, Oreo crumble stuck to the bottom, and so I really had to scrape that out. I kept trying to do that with a fork, and then I'm like, you know what? This is the job of a spoon. So, and I did spill some. You can kind of see that on the stove top. But there's no reason for whoever's eating this to get cheated out of that crust that's stuck to the bottom. So scrape that up, put it on the dish. Kind of looks cute, like it's supposed to be there on the side, nice and pretty. And then, of course, you grab your, keto Cool Whip and just douse this thing in more Cool Whip because it just makes it that much better. And it kind of cuts through some of the kind of thick richness, even though it's a cream-like thing, so it really adds richness, but it's cold and a little bit wetter than everything else, and it really just goes perfect. So there you have it, peanut butter Oreo pie.